Well, looky here. You are listening to someone who is bold, authentic, diverse, unpredictable. Baby, I am unapologetically Ramon, and you have entered my zone, the QB zone, baby. Hello, somebody.
Rock Legion.
So in this episode of the QB Zone, I'm very interested and intrigued to talk about a subject very dear to me, and I'm sure a lot of us have been through. I have two special guests that will help me have this conversation, and that is Miss Jasmyn Elliott and Brittney Revere. How are you doing,
Good
ladies?
evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
So we all know that grief comes in different forms, and there's different types of grief. It's not just death. Sometimes grief can be of a relationship, it can be a career, it can be a job. But for the purpose of this episode, we're specifically talking about death. And in our hearts, we all know that death is a part of life. In fact, death gives meaning to our existence because it reminds us how precious life is. The loss of a loved one is life's most stressful event and can cause a major emotional crisis. After the death of someone you love, you experience bereavement, which literally means to be deprived by death. Ladies, in regards to grief, what relative was your first experience with grief? And briefly talk about how it affected you. We'll start with the newbie first, Jasmyn.
Well, my first direct relative that I experienced grief with was my great aunt. She lived in Philadelphia, and I didn't quite grow up with her, but she was still a pretty integral part of the family. So her passing definitely impacted us all. And I think that the worst part of it was seeing how hard my father grieved her because they were very close. And so seeing his pain really like filtered down into me. And so even though I didn't necessarily have as close of a relationship with her, just seeing my father being so hurt by it, I empathized with him quickly. Now, as far as relatives' deaths that affected me personally, the hardest one was my grandfather. He passed away about gosh, it's been 7 years now, goodness. And in some ways it feels like it happened yesterday, and then it feels like it happened a very long time ago at the same time. And he was the patriarch of our family, and it was also very unexpected too. So losing him left quite a hole in our family dynamic, and we miss him very much.
How about you, Brittney?
My first experience with grief, I would say, would have had to been my paternal grandmother. She passed away while I was in college at Florida Memorial. It was very, very difficult because I was raised by grandma for a good chunk of my life, childhood, up until a little bit of teenage years, a little bit, I would say. I lived with my dad in teenage years, but I was always, kind of with grandma. So when grandma passed, I just was like devastated. Like she passed away right before I graduated college. So like a few months before it was time to graduate, I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Oh, wow.
Like, excuse my language, but I'm like, are you serious? Like, you supposed to watch me walk across the stage. And she just is grandma. Like, just thinking about it, just, make you teary eyed because that was the person that, held the glue together for the family. And I just remember so many things, always at grandma's house, wake up, going to school, coming home from school, doing homework and playing outside with cousins. Cause we kind of grew up around cousins, even though I had siblings, I would say I was always around cousins. And, it was just very, very hard. I just to elaborate a little bit more, my dad got the phone call. We always lived in Homestead when I moved with my dad or whatever. So we had to come up to Miami, over there off of Ives Dairy. Don't remember what area that's called, but I know it's off of Ives Dairy exit in Miami or whatnot. So we had to drive all the way from Homestead all the way up and just my dad doing like a dash on the highway, like we in the emergency lane with emergency lights on or whatever, and just to see my grandma there, you know, cold, and I'm like, wow, like she really died. Like we wasn't expecting this. My aunt, who's RN, was actually the one taking care of her, and it just was very, very hard, very hard. I think that was the worst experience for me. Worst first experience aside from losing a sibling.
Right. I think for me, my first experience with grief was my great grandmother dying. I wasn't old enough to drive, so I had to be like 15 years old. I didn't quite have my license yet. And she was the matriarch of the family. I was raised with my maternal grandparents, and she was my grandmother's mom. We were very, very close. I used to always go visit almost every holiday. It's funny because she always referred to me by my middle name, Marquise. So if you said Ramon, she didn't know who the heck you was talking about. She like, that's not that baby name. She wouldn't know who, like, she only called me Marquise. And one thing I always loved is that she used to always collect coins, and she would wrap them up, and she would put them in these peanut bottles. And so every time she would see me, she would hand me a peanut bottle, literally like clockwork. She would hand me a peanut bottle every time she saw me. And I would have like 10 to 20, like lots of, for a little kid, I got money, I would have $10, $20 worth of coins, and she did that up until she died. I would say that the worst one for me, though, and I'm pretty sure, well, Brittney, but just from social media, was my grandmother. June would make 3 years. And so for me, that was the worst because that raised me. So for me, that was like I lost my mom. And so that was hard. It was, yeah, because, she died June 5th, 2019. And I already had something that had happened in my life. And so I already felt like my life was at the worst it ever been. And so for a few months later, for that to happen, it was just like a domino effect downward. And I really can't even say that I got to the other side of it until really this year. And I'll touch on that a little later. But yeah, I would say that for me, that was the thing that was the worst grief for me. And holidays are still a little weird. I'm not sure about y'all. For me, holidays are still a little weird. I don't really celebrate or care for holidays like I used to. For you ladies, did that affect the holidays in any way, shape, or form? Did it affect how you celebrated certain moments that maybe when they were alive, it was more tradition?
I might write this one out. Is that better? Okay. I might want to sit that one out just because I was raised Jehovah's Witness, so like that part of my family doesn't celebrate holidays anyway. Okay. I will say though that there were quite a few milestones that were missed. In particular, the birth of my nephew, my son, and because him and my grandfather again were really close, so it's like, wow, he missed that moment. Right. And there's so many aspects of my nephew's personality that I know my grandfather would be in love with. Aww. He's an adorable kid, and he's like really helpful, and he's very smart. So, and my grandfather's kind of like the favorite among all the grandkids. Right. And he would have this running joke that whoever the youngest grandchild or great grand is at the time, he'd go, whoever it is, you're my only friend. You're my only friend in the world. So it's like, Cadence missed that. missed that moment. And like even just getting together with family is very different. Even like outside of like holidays or celebrations, it doesn't really happen anymore.
Okay. How about you, Brittney?
Yeah, I would agree that celebrations don't really happen anymore. I'm not really sure if I remember how much of a toll it took on any celebrations, but I just know that the family doesn't get together like that anymore. We have not gotten together like that anymore since she passed, and it's been years. I've been out of college now for a while, so I'm like, yeah, it's just same old. And then I don't really think that my family is big on memorializing people once they pass away. My aunt, well, at least I know one of my aunts, she's like, when I pass away, don't come to my grave trying to decorate it and do all that. She's like, give me my flowers while I'm here. She's like, I don't believe in going to the grave site and doing all that for people and putting their pictures on shirts and all that. She's like, no, you love people while they're here. So when they do pass away, you did your part and that's all that matters. Um, but for me, I would just say, it was a lot for me because I'm like, that's grandma. Grandma raised me. Grandma was like mom. So of course it felt different to me as a grandchild. I don't know how the adults handled it because
Right.
they didn't really show too much emotion or anything. So I don't know how they dealt with it, but for me, I cried for a long time. Like even when I was in school, one of my professors, she actually just passed me. She was like, you don't have to take the final. You've done all your work. Like I'm just gonna give you an A. Just take all the time that you need. You don't have to even come back to class.
Oh, that's
That's
good.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, because I was like losing it,
Right,
like
right.
really losing it. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't think this was gonna hurt this bad, but it did. We think grandparents supposed to live forever.
But you at
Right.
least want them to be alive for those main milestones, though. You think, oh, they're gonna be around for this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because those are the family members, and like with grandparents and parents, like, and siblings, it's like we've literally known them all our lives and we've never known what the world looks like without them. And
hmm
so to have that taken away, it's a new normal that takes a long time to adjust to.
yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's so interesting that you said giving the flowers while they're still alive. My grandmother was very big on that. And I remember, and also she's a very structured, organized person. So she had like her plot was already paid for. She had how she wanted her program, what she didn't want. And I remember she did not want anything at the church. She just wanted whatever little simple program at the gravesite. She, a part of the obituary where they like most funerals you go, they read it out loud. She ain't
hmm
into that. She was like, they could read to themselves. She was like, once the service start, don't open the casket back up. She was like, leave her alone. Like that's literally what she had in her thing. Leave me alone when she closed the casket. So yeah, she was very big on that. And I think for me though, although the grief took a crazy toll on me, one of the things that gave me peace was that I was very confident and assured that I gave her her flower while she was alive. So for me, that gave me peace. And I think some of the relatives that might not have taken it so easy, that a lot of times they're the ones who cause the most hell. They're the ones who probably didn't
Oh
give
yeah.
them flowers while they was alive, you know?
hmm
But I know, Brittney, you touched on, that day for you. What do you remember about that day, Jasmyn, with your grandfather?
Oh, that day was chaotic. Actually, I was working with you. We were coworkers at the time that this happened.
Oh
So I
no.
just, yes, I remember that I came back from doing something. I think it might have dropped off a child or something at the group home. So I come back to like work on some stuff, and I get a phone call from my mother. And I'm like, well, this is different. So like when mom was calling in the middle of the day, you pick up. And so she's like,
Absolutely.
your grandfather's in the hospital. And I'm like, goodbye, everybody. And I literally dropped everything and just went to the hospital that day. And all of my mom was there, my grandmother, of course, all of their children were there. And like at the time it's like we thought, okay, he's gonna be okay. No big deal. These things happened because he had already survived other things before. Like this wasn't his first run-in with a hospitalization. So we're like, okay, maybe his heart's just acting up. They'll sew him back together. It'll be fine. But
Right.
then when I have one of my uncles come out we were waiting outside of the hospital for some reason. I think because there was just so many of us. So my uncle comes outside and he says, everybody come into the hospital now. So I'm thinking, oh, grandpa must be awake. And so we all we walk into the room, and then I distinctly remember my grandmother and my aunt, one of my aunts, just crying, like full blown tears. And that's when I knew, oh, this isn't gonna go the way I thought it was gonna go.
Right.
And so this really stretched into almost like a 3-day ordeal where the next day they're like, well, there might be some hope. There's still a little bit of brain activity. Let's see what we can do. But it was that next day where everybody was there, like my uncles, cousins, my father, which would be when my parents weren't even married and my father showed up, because according to him, that's like basically his dad too.
That's
So
awesome.
it's just all of us together in that hospital room, and then my grandfather being in the hospital bed and he's gone. So that was, so in a way it was good that we were all together, but was very chaotic at the same time. So it's like that memory of that day, like I have like flashes of it, but it was just so chaotic that it was difficult. I do also remember though there was a strange, but I don't know, maybe I might have encountered an angel at the time. I'm a Christian, so I do believe those things can happen. And there's
Absolutely.
this random man in the hospital who, like, I had to walk out of the room because it was just overwhelming. And this random man came out of nowhere, and he's like, "Oh, what's wrong? What's happening?" And I explained to him what was happening. And he just gave me a hug. He prayed over me, and I never saw him again after that. And Jackson's not that huge of a hospital, so you would think that you would run into him a couple of times.
Right, right.
And we were there for hours. So I'm like, did I meet an angel today? I don't know. But I will say though that the best part about it, I mean, what's the best part of a bad situation? But the best part about it is that we're all together as a family.
Mm, that's awesome. That's awesome. For me, that night I was at home. I was watching NBA playoffs. I remember the Warriors were playing whoever they were playing, and I remember my cousin called me, and I was like, "Oh, I just call her when I come back from the gym." This was kind of the events that led up, and I come from the gym, forgot to call her back, um, and I started watching the game, and then I remember she called me again, and I was so into the game, it was good. I call her at halftime. Didn't even make it, and I was like maybe just a few minutes away from halftime, and she texted me this time. And she said, "Did anyone call you about Granny?" And I'm like, I said to myself, I don't remember getting a call today. Let me call her. Because you done called me a few times and I don't answer. I'm thinking maybe she's back in the hospital. Because she had a heart attack maybe 4 years prior. But she had been doing really good outside of her memory wasn't as sharp, but she was still cooking for herself and going to church. And she wasn't driving. Because we had a little episode where we were like, yeah, you're not going to be driving anymore. But she was still working in her yard, still going for her walks every day. I remember friends of mine telling me when I went home after she died, was telling me we had just saw her walking earlier that day. So, anyways, I called my cousin and she says that she's on her way to meet meet her dad at the hospital. Granny had went into cardiac arrest. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. She just got to the hospital. She was looking for the doctors and stuff. I said, okay, call me when you find out something. I don't think nothing of it. Continue watching the game. Nothing came over me. And then she texted me, and I'll never forget the text. The text said, she's gone.
You found out through a text message?
Yeah, she texted me and said she's gone. So then I called her, and she was like, yeah, I'm here at the hospital. Her dad was there with the doctor people, and my grandmother was home. She started throwing up, and she had told her oldest son who lived with her, which that's a whole different conversation. She told him to call her baby boy. That's my cousin who I'm talking about, her daddy. Why you didn't call 911 first? That's whatever. But whatever, you called him first. I'd have called 911 and then called him, but whatever. And by the time my uncle came over, 911 was there because he ended up calling 911, like my mom, whatever. And I will say what was kind of traumatizing is that I'm a very visual person. So when you tell me something, I'm visualizing as it happens. And what broke my heart was that they said the ambulance people came, they had my grandmother on the stretcher, and then she went out on the back of the stretcher, like I think they call it flatline or whatever, and they did the bolt thing that's still on the TV. They did
defibrillator.
Right, and so for her body to jerk, that's the first thing I'm picturing.
Oh.
The crap that I would see on the movie, just picturing them jerking my grandmother's body, and then she came back. But then unfortunately, it happened again, and the second time she didn't come back. Yeah, that was tough because I remember me still going to work the next day, thinking that I'm going to throw myself into work just for this one day, and then I'm going to get on the road and go home. I think I might have made it 2 hours. I like, yeah, no, I can't do this. But that was rough. And I would say, just from a mental health standpoint, I regressed so much. I know when it comes to a lot of the emotions that we feel with grief, you know, there's denial, there's disbelief, confusion, shock, sadness, yearning, anger, humiliation, despair, and guilt. And I think I experienced all of those except for humiliation multiple times. Thanks to therapy, prayer, friends who, you know, were definitely part of my village, is why I can talk about it now and not get emotional, or there's no hesitation, because I feel like we all have gone through some aspect of it, and I feel like sharing it is a release. And it's impacted me in a lot of ways, just to allow people to love on me. I was diagnosed with depression in 2016. And so when this happened, I definitely didn't handle it the right way. What aspects of your mental health would you say that the grief affected you? And what do you remember being the main thing that kind of helped you kind of move through that? We'll start with you, Brittney.
Ask the question again. I'm sorry.
What would you say? How would you say the grief affected your mental health? And what was one main thing that helped you push through it?
I would say the grief affected my mental health back then by putting me in a depressive state of mind. I didn't seek any counseling back then. I'm really not sure why. I don't even think I thought about it back then. But just continued prayers, really. Prayers and just memories of the good times. Because we got a lot of memories, a lot of photos, and, you know, I just kept going like, okay, I'm making her proud. I got my college degree. You know, school was instilled in us. Like, that's all Zoe Lady ever talked about was school, school, school. You know, go to school and become somebody, get a great job and become somebody. So I'm like, well, I got my degree and I got a good job. So I'm becoming somebody. I am somebody.
Hello.
So, you know, just constant prayer and just memories, really. But I never thought about counseling back then. I don't even think if I recognized that I was depressed back then.
Okay.
But I was. Now that I roll back the curtains of my memory, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I was depressed back then. I cried a lot and, you know, didn't really want to be bothered with nobody because everybody knew I was kind of grandma's favorite.
Right.
So when it came to me, grandma was going beyond the earth, beyond the heavens. So
That's right.
I was like, yeah, you know, that's my girl, my world. So I just was down in the dumps, but nothing but prayer, really. You know, I was going to church back then. I am a Christian. I do believe in God. So just continued support from those people that were my friends back then. I am in a sorority, so I had my sorority sisters come through for me, and they showed up. Some of them, if they didn't show up to the funeral, they showed up to like the repast, if I'm not mistaken, and got me like a nice card and everything. Everybody was just checking on me because everybody know how everybody feel about grandparents.
Absolutely.
So just really support from the community and prayer.
Amen. How about you, Jasmyn?
For me, it was like depression with a hint of rage too, because I was really angry about the whole thing, about the fact that my grandfather was gone, period. And also just the way that he went, it's like we didn't really get a chance to like say goodbye. So I felt robbed in that sense, because yes, I know that death is a part of life, but it's like I didn't get a chance to like really tell him just that one last time that I loved him, you know? So there's a lot of anger there. So I did go to counseling. I was also part of a really amazing church family back then. And they really rallied around me and made sure that I was okay. And I really threw myself, it was really at that point that I really threw myself into the worship team at the time. So having that outlet through music helped so much. And in particular, my best friend and his family really like scooped me up and made sure that they kept me busy, because he knows me very well. It's like if I sit too long with something, it's like I'm gonna just kind of turn to mush. So he's like, you know what, we're going to the beach today. Pack a bathing suit, or hey, we're gonna do this today. You're coming over for dinner. And so his whole family like kind of adopted me for that period. So I didn't feel like I was alone. And even my own family too, we really routed around each other, especially my mom and I. She's my rock. I love her. And so in some ways we're able to even see the humor in some things and just just bounce some feelings off of each other too. And having that support, and with my mom, my brothers, and also my brother too, that helped me get through it. And I'm a firm believer in prayer and also a firm believer in quality therapy. So I dove right into both.
Yeah, I would say my best friend helped me a lot too back then, a whole lot.
Yeah. You know, for me, it was weird because I didn't know how. I think you mentioned, Jasmyn, just like you expected this person to be around. You had to find this new normal without them, you know, being here. And so for me, it was like, what do I do? If I'm having a good day, I call Granny. If I'm having a bad day, I call Granny. If I just, you know, want to have a good, because we had the best conversation. Her, the gossip, the jokes, the lectures, we had the best conversation. And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do now? Needed advice, I'm calling Granny. And so everybody knew how close we were. A lot of people didn't know why. And it was interesting because, and I'll share this one story. So for about a year, I lived with my mom, my biological mom, and a boyfriend at the time. You know, in child welfare, we call him a paramour. I lived with her paramour at the time and never liked him, not nan bit. And so I went through a very traumatic period when they were together and I lived with them. And I remember that relationship ended while my mom was pregnant with his child, and we ended up living somewhere else. We're still in Tallahassee, by the way. And my grandmother found us. She had hired a private investigator, but that's a whole nother conversation as far as why she had to do that. But she had a private investigator to find us because he ostracized us very well from our family. So she found us, my grandparents found us, and I was only supposed to come stay with her for the summertime. Now, my grandmother's a very spiritual woman. She prayed. She followed that spirit of discernment. Anything not sitting right with her, she got to find out what's going on. She'll pray for the Lord to give her a sign. And so she claims that from the time I came back, that she always had this feeling that something went right. This is what she told me, you know, years after this happened. And I was in my room changing. I thought I had closed the door all the way, but evidently God made sure I kept the door cracked, because she ended up peeping her little eye through that hole in the door and saw these marks on my body. So you can get your own interpretation where those come from. And she, of course, walked in, was like, what is that? What's wrong with your back? What's that's on you? And any boy, you want to protect your parent. You want to protect your mom. I ended up telling her the truth of what happened. And from there on, my grandmother I was 9 at the time, by the way. My grandmother was very dedicated to protecting me. She was very overprotective from that moment forward, even when I was an adult. But not only my physical body, she protected my heart. She protected my mind. She was very big on my relationship with God. She was very big on what you put in is what you get out. And she just really loved me unconditionally. And I didn't think that anybody on earth could do that. I thought only God could do that. And the reason why I tell that story is because I didn't realize that one of the reasons why my grief was affecting me so bad was because I felt like that 9-year-old boy inside of me was like, who was going to protect me now? Who was going to keep me safe? And it wasn't until December that, this past December, that the person who was the perpetrator of my trauma, I found out they died. And I just had this, I just gotta be honest. I'm not trying to offend nobody. But when I tell you something left me, something heavy left me when I found out that that man, and I had never seen him since he left my mom when she was 6 months pregnant. I had never seen the man, never had contact with the man, I'm sure had he still been alive, I would have never had any contact with this man. There's no reason for us to cross paths. But the fact that he was alive and still on this earth, and that 9-year-old boy did not have closure, I felt like he finally had closure. He could finally rest. And that's why, as soon as this new year started, I felt like the best version of myself because the adult Ramon can now live. The adult Ramon can move on. I have had so much peace and joy and clarity since this new year started. And I really feel like it's because I was finally able to process and have some closure for 9-year-old Ramon. And so a lot of people in my family would make comments, oh, your granny spoiled you, granny this and the third. And at times it would rub me the wrong way because I'm like, if they only knew why I was so close, if they only knew why she raised me the way she did. This woman saved me and protected me. And that was hard. I think that in regards to my mental health, that was one of the things that was holding me back. 9-year-old Ramon and 30-something-year-old Ramon, I think I was 35 when I started therapy, was clashing. And, you know, I couldn't live until he had closure. When you go through grief, what was the one thing you guys learn about the process, and what advice would you give to someone who's going through it? Let's start with you, Jasmyn.
I learned that the process is not linear, despite what despite what good old social work school will tell you. It's like, oh, there's 5 stages of grief. You go through this, and then you find acceptance. No, you don't. You do not. That is, I wish it was that easy. It's like sometimes you'll be bargaining, and then you're right back to rage, and then it can be all over the place. And so, to anybody who may be grieving, my one piece of advice, which I'm sure that our elders have told us that is this for many other things, is take your time. There's no need to rush through the process, and there's no rush for you to get better. Just because I think that a lot of times we live in a world that's so obsessed with productivity that it's like, oh, when are you going to get over it so you can get back to your life? Right. It's going to take, it might take a while, and it's okay that it takes a while. So take that time, however much time you need. It could be 6 months, could be 6 years. Of course, I would also implore you to say don't get stuck there. But at the same time, don't feel like you have to rush the process because you owe somebody else your productivity or your contributions to the world. Take the time to grieve and take the time to heal.
That's so interesting you said that, because I am such a control freak. And I've always been a person of service. That's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed child welfare. And I just remember I didn't do that. I had to get back to work. I had clients that need me. I had these youth that needed me. And it was a good distraction, but I'm not healing. I'm not dealing with the grief. I'm literally just throwing myself into my work because I'm focused on productivity. I'm focused on, this is what I'm going through, but life has to go on. But how do I go on? You know, I'll say this, that I mentioned earlier how I wasn't dealing with it in the best way. I would come home from work, and every day for about 3-4 months, I was taking Benadryl and alcohol. Just to get some kind of sleep, just to get me to not have to deal with what I'm feeling and just have to deal with the world. And I'll wake up next morning, go to work, come home, do the same thing over again.
You renewing yourself, self-medicating.
Absolutely. What made me stop was this lasted for about 3 months. And I remember starting to feel these pains and changes in my body. So I have Crohn's disease. I was diagnosed when I was 13. And whenever I've ever had a flare-up, she's always been there every step of the way. I've never had an issue with my Crohn's, good, bad, or indifferent, and she wasn't there. And so when I started to feel certain things going on, like, oh my God, wait a minute, am I having a flare-up? How the heck am I going to handle this flare-up? And the number one source and rock I've always had is no longer here. So I'm like, yeah, Ramon, you gotta get this together. This ain't gonna work. So I literally just started slowly doing better with it. It would either go to maybe just alcohol or maybe just a Benadryl. There were times where I stumbled and I would do both again. But yeah, that I stopped that after a while. I was going to therapy more. And I just didn't want to be physically sick. And I guess that was enough motivation for me to stop self-medicating. It wasn't like I needed any kind of treatment or anything. I encourage treatment for those who need it. But just for me, I didn't need any at that moment because my health and staying in remission was enough motivation for me. I know you talked about, Jasmyn, about taking time. I would say one of my pieces of advice would be just ride the wave as it comes. I'm such a control freak, and I'm so used to having control over every aspect of my life, whether it's my caseload, whether it's my social life or my side endeavors. I've always been able to have control. I've always had control over my emotions. I've always been able to turn these bad boys on and off. I was not able to have control at all. You can't have no control over the grief process at all. So just ride the wave as it comes. And don't be embarrassed if you feel like you batshit crazy. Because you could be happy 1 second, the next second you could be angry, then you could be crying, then you could be back to being happy. You can go through 6, 7 different emotions in an hour. Let it be okay. Give yourself permission to have those emotions and just ride the wave as they come. How about you, Brittney? What advice would you give to someone who's going through grief?
I would say allow yourself grace to feel those emotions and those feelings, but don't stay in it. Just feel it. If you're angry, be angry. If you want to scream, punch something, break something, I don't know, tear something down, sit in your car and just scream it at the top of your lungs. If you want to cry, if you want to journal, listen to music, work out, whatever's going to help you get those emotions out, do it, as long as it's not drugs, I would say. But I mean, everybody has their own vices and their own coping mechanisms, and I would definitely say seek counseling. I don't remember if I did counseling with I don't think I was in therapy when my sister died, because my sister died in 2013. So I don't think I was in counseling then. I think I started the counseling after, I think 2 years after she died, but that was, I don't know. I was like working as a court liaison, and I realized I had to take time off, and I was kind of like losing it. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep, in school and working full time. And then I went to this therapist, Ramon, my therapist, she's the boss.
Yeah.
But she did my treatment plan or whatever. She's like, oh, you have major depressive disorder. And I was like, that's why I keep randomly crying. Like, I keep randomly feeling like I can't get it together. And I'm like, it's not just because I miss my sister, but it just was so much going on between missing my sister, being married and then getting a divorce. And, these last few years, I still do therapy. So I would say, I don't do therapy, but I do my check-ins now. Like, I'm done with my treatment plan, but I still check in with my therapist whenever I feel like I'm having a downward spiral or whatever. But I would definitely say feel those feelings and those emotions and communicate. Tell people when you're not okay. Because we have a tendency to tell people, oh, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And deep down inside, you're not okay. Deep down inside, you angry as hell. You want to cry. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, this week, I was like, yeah, I ain't feeling it. Like, I'm super emotional. Like, yesterday was my sister's birthday. She would have been 37 years old. And I'm like, I woke up yesterday, and, did my little Facebook post or whatever. Everybody was commenting, sending love, this and that. And I'm like, I appreciate it, but y'all pray for her kids. My sister had 2 kids. And I'm like, I just cry and cry and cry. And I'm like, it's going to be 9 years this year that she passed away, but grief is not a one-day process. It's not a 3-month process. It's not a 6-month process. this month, this year, July will be 9 years. And I think the part that makes me so sad is that she left her kids.
Right.
Like her kids were little when she passed away. My niece is 13, she'll be 14 in August. I think my nephew is 16, he'll be 17 in August as well. And they were little when she died. I think my nephew was 8 or 9 when his mom died. And my niece, I think, was 4, if I'm not mistaken. I really don't remember. And I'm just like, I just, thought about the memories, thought about the time. So some days you have those moments where you think about those people and you just like, wow, like, I can't believe they're gone. Like yesterday, I just was like, wow, like, even talking about it right now, like, you know, wow, she left. Like, that's not my only sister. I have another sister on my dad's side, and I have two brothers and a stepbrother on my dad's side. But it's like she was the oldest, then me, and then the other sister, and then the twins, and then my stepbrother, then the twins. But I'm like, yeah, my niece and nephew didn't get to grow up with their mom. She didn't get to see, you know, just those things, for her kids. So, it's a process. So I would just say stick with the process, whatever the process is, whatever the process is. Like, like I said, I still talk to my counselor, so my therapist. So I text her yesterday. I was like, listen, I need to talk to you. Like, it's a lot of stuff been going on, and it ain't just because of my sister, but have those people that you could check in with, those friends that you could check in with, and make sure that they real friends. Because I do
Amen.
understand that, excuse me, I do understand that people do get busy with life, but nobody's ever that busy that they can't check on you. Communication is a two-way street. So if you have that moment where you're like, I really need somebody to talk to, text them, hey, I need to talk to you. I don't care if I ain't talked to you in 3 weeks. If you my friend like you say you are, I need to talk to you. And that's how me and Ramon are. We might not talk every day, but when we talk, we talk. We link up. When we link up, and we have a grandiose time. And that's all that matters. Make sure you have those great people in your corner. Get therapy. And for those that don't want to do therapy, find another coping mechanism. There's different things you can find online. It don't have to be a therapist. And if you're a believer of Christ, you can go to church. And if you're not a believer of Christ, find something else, maybe like art therapy or those smash it places where you can smash plates and, things of that sort. Whatever helps you get through the process. But don't isolate yourself.
Absolutely. Jasmyn, what are some ways that you have benefited from maintaining your mental health? What are some things that helped you?
Well, some things that have, as far as like the process itself or like the results?
I would say the results.
The results are amazing in the sense that I feel like I have a purpose in spite of anything I might go through, grief and any other obstacle that I might face. And I also just believe that my being mentally healthy makes me better ultimately for my family, makes me better for my future. And again, just I could talk about my nephew all day. I love him to bits. And I always make it a point to remember that I miss Titi. I miss Titi. And I want to make sure that I'm around and the best possible version of myself because he's the next generation of our family. So it's really important that all elements of the family that are available are there to support him. So if I'm not at my best, then I can't be the Titi that he knows and loves. So it behooves me to really focus on my mental health through counseling, through prayer. Funny that you mentioned art therapy. I tried that too. It's actually really amazing to put your emotions on a canvas that you can't really put into words, but a color might explain it a little better. And I will say that it also helps me make better choices for my future. And as a matter of fact, I'm like completely off topic, but I'm actually switching jobs because of my mental health. Again, because I looked at where I was career-wise. I actually switched out of social work completely and went to another field. But even looking where I was career-wise, I had to ask myself the question, is this a good place for me? Well, two questions. Is this a good place for me to be right now? And do I see myself here a year from now and happy? And the answer to both questions was no. So I knew that it was time to
I
move
know that's right.
Right.
on.
Yeah.
So I make those choices not necessarily like with money in mind, because we can always make money. That's not a problem. I
Yeah.
don't make those choices with quote unquote company loyalty in mind, because let's be honest, if they were to fire me yesterday,
They're
they would
gonna
be
replace you.
yeah,
They'll replace you
it's
by the
like
end of the week.
Mhm.
exactly. It's like, and like I know we're talking about death, and I don't want to be facetious or disrespectful, but if I would have dropped dead yesterday, speak that into the past. If I were to drop dead yesterday, my job listing would be posted on Indeed before my body was in the ground. So,
That
and
is true.
ultimately, they be interviewing people before I had a proper burial. So I
That
always
is
make
true.
choices with an eye towards my mental health and making sure that I'm at my best, and everything else will follow.
Yeah. And I'm sure that we all have, and I think Brittney or Jasmyn, you guys mentioned, you know, all the good memories. I think that that definitely has found, or not found, but it has definitely allowed me to acquire some comfort and peace. I laugh. I get comforted by the memories, and I'm sure we all have learned something from the people that we've lost. So I would say I think that that also helps as well in moving forward and thinking of it as if how would they want me to live my life? How would they want? What can I do to make them proud of me? And that really gives me like a new fire and passion for life, just to be the best I can be, because I know that this is what Granny would want and this is what she taught me. And I always say that, you know, she left materialistic things to people, but I've always felt like I got the best, and it wasn't materialistic things. I got the memories, I got the life lessons, I got the lectures that I depend on still to this day. Like I got stuff that is not tangible and can last forever.
Right.
Whereas all this materialistic stuff she left people, girl, some of them are already broke again, or they done lost whatever she left them, which is a whole other conversation, you know, and I'm still comforted. And anytime I go through something, um, I felt like she instilled in me the things that she knew I was going to need when she wasn't around. Although I looked at it initially as like, what the hell is my new number going to be like? What the hell am I supposed to do about this woman? But I had to look into the things that she taught me and realize, wait a minute, she taught me and gave me everything I needed to move forward. Just a few things I wanted to read when I was looking more into just different things that people had to say about grief and mental health. You know, some of the things that people can do when it comes to living with grief is seeking out caring people, express your feelings, take care of your health, accept that life is not, accept that life is for the living, postpone major life changes, be patient, seek outside help when necessary. And when it comes to helping others grieve, share the sorrow. I do feel like we can learn from each other, and you know, your pain can be your purpose. Don't offer false comfort. And let's talk about that for a second.
Oof. That's a good one.
Don't offer false comfort. And I, you know, and maybe y'all can give me y'all opinion, because I felt like at times was I being harsh or mean. Here's my problem with some of us colors.
Just say what's colors I'm weak.
Oh, I'll get this thing. Let me get this thing off my screen, honey, because I don't know what this thing, and I can edit all this crap shit. I ain't worried about that. But yeah, let me tell you about this color. So when we lose people, people die. Oh, they're in a better place. Oh, he won't put more on you than you can bear. What about that do you think is going to make me feel better about what I'm
Nothing whatsoever.
Like,
Nothing.
if you can't give me some advice from
I
your
just don't say
heart,
nothing.
don't say nothing at all. I don't
Just
need
give me a hug. Just give me a
no
hug.
cliche sayings. I don't need the
Right.
stuff that you just heard somebody say on a commercial, or you done heard somebody in church say many times. I don't understand. Please don't
Like
give
the
me
one
all
that the one that I hate the most is like, they're in a better place. I'm like, it's like that might be true, but I kind of want them here with me right now, so that's not really helping my cause. So if you could just not do that, that'd be great.
You
I
know,
don't think I ever told anyone they're in a better
A
place.
better play, I would never. No.
You know, they said, oh, they in a better place. She not suffering no more. How is that gonna make me feel better right now? Like, if you can't give me no genuine advice from your heart, I don't want nothing you got to say. You can just say you praying for me. You can just say, I hope you feel better. I'm here if you need me. Just leave it there. And let's just hit me up if you need me. Because we know a lot of people say that just because it sounds nice. But you hit them up and they ain't know it. It's crickets.
Nowhere to be found.
Nowhere to be found. So what the purpose are you saying that for?
Did you find it made them feel better about themselves?
Did you guys feel like you saw people's true colors, or you really saw who was in your corner when you guys were going through your grief?
You always do.
Yes,
I think the three things that, Sharp, I don't mean to cut you off, Jasmyn.
No, go ahead. Go.
The three things that make you realize who's really for you is death, a wedding, and having kids.
I like that.
Because everybody want to be your child godparent when you, that's my niece, that's my nephew, that's this, that's that. Granted, I don't have any children yet, but I've seen it.
Of course.
I'm call me if you need me. I'm here to help you out. Y'all ain't nowhere to be found. You need a babysitter because you got a family emergency and you can't take the child with you, or X, Y, and Z. And then when you have a loss in the family, I'm here for you if you need me. Okay, and I'm texting you, hey, I need you. Can you come? Can you come to the rescue? Can you help me out? Can you go sit with me at the beach? Can you just sit in the car with me? Can I sit on your front porch? Just listen to me cry, or give me a hug, or do something. Y'all ain't nowhere to be found. Oh, when you get married, I want to come to the wedding. Inviting folks to the wedding, y'all ain't showed up. So now folks don't pay
$50, $120 for a plate that you didn't eat,
and they ain't showed up.
Exactly.
That just happened to somebody that I know. She was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't invite you guys to the wedding because we have me and my her husband. They have a list of family members that they really need to invite or whatever.
Right.
Family ain't even showed up.
Jesus.
Oh no.
Yeah, paid for these plates and these people didn't even come. Still ain't even send a text and say, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it. I was sick or whatever.
Yeah. And it says here, it doesn't help the grieving person when you say it was for the best or you'll get over it in time. Instead, offer a simple expression of sorrow and take time to listen. I can't stand when people try to rush your grief or compare it to their grief. Like, for example, for me in my heart, I lost a parent. It wasn't just a regular grandparent. I've really had people who try to compare my grief to theirs as if I'm not handling it in a good way because it was a grandparent. Okay, but your parents are still alive, both of them. That's not the same thing. Mom and daddy never been in my life, so that's not the same thing. And finding out who's really there for you, there are definitely some times where I've done some people purge. Some of y'all got to go. Cut them straight off. You handed me the knife and this was to do it for you. The other two things when it comes to helping others grieve, it says be patient and encourage professional help when necessary. And I think that's a good thing because a lot of times it's great when people confide in us, but you may not have the full capacity that's needed to help them process through it. Sometimes this is really like you really might want to talk to a therapist or a spiritual person. Because last thing I want to do is give somebody some advice, baby, that helps them regress. I feel so guilty. What was your favorite thing, and I'll end on this note, what was your favorite thing that you learned from your sister, Brittney?
My favorite thing that I learned, she was a hustler. She was the go-getter. And she never backed down from nobody. I think that was a similarity that we had, always standing on our own 2 feet. And listen, we're going to say what need to be said, when it need to be said, and how it need to be said. We were zero tolerance. If I don't like you, I don't like you.
I love
Like, it's nothing you can do about it. It's nothing you can do to change the fact of why I don't like you. I don't like you because of X, Y, and Z. And for her, when she didn't like something or someone, she stood on it. She said she meant what she said, and she stuck by what she said. She didn't renege on her word. And I just feel like she just was, always she just was always genuine. So it always reminds me to be genuine, be gentle with people. You never know what they're going through. My sister, she passed away from kidney failure and stuff. She was diabetic, so everything ended up shutting down. But even in her hard time, she still was genuine. She still was graceful, and she still smiled like nothing was wrong. So you conquer the day, you smile. Even when you broken deep down inside, sometimes you gotta, I ain't gonna say fake it. My thing is face
Right.
it till you make it.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Like, just smile.
I would say for me, hard work. She believed in hard work, and she showed me that every day. Working hard for everything you wanted. Independence. She was an independent woman. She carried the world on her shoulders. She carried her family on her shoulders. And she did a lot of it by herself. She didn't depend on no man. So when my granddaddy was acting a plum fool and doing what he was doing, she was still able to keep her head high, shoulders back, and keep life moving. She didn't have to depend on no man for nothing. But also her faith. I always say she introduced me to God. She was the number one person who fed my spiritual relationship. And so I would say that her faith was definitely something that I learned a lot from. And she had stories for days as far as what faith had done for her. And I appreciate that because a lot of times we can tell you, oh, you need to do this, that, and the third. But she gave more of a practical, real life occurrence so I could really see firsthand or secondhand. How faith made a difference in her life. What would you say was your favorite thing you learned from your grandfather, Jasmyn?
Me, the biggest lesson I learned from my grandfather is to never stop learning. He had an eighth grade education, and he dropped out of school in the eighth grade. Had been working from when he was 15 onward, but no, there was never a point where I asked him a question and his answer was, I don't know, and that was the end of it. If he didn't know the answer to a question, he would go find it. If he didn't know how to do something, he would learn how to do it and learn how to do it very well. Like, you can ask him, like, who invented tea, and he would know, just because he had a zest for learning and a zest for trying his hand at new things. I think that maybe in another life he could have been an engineer, because this guy like could take apart an engine and put it back together without a manual. So like on paper he was a dunce, but in practice he was a very smart man. And so that instilled in me this enthusiasm for learning. He would always encourage me to make sure that I read. He was always reading something. If it was a newspaper, it was a book, it was always something in his hand that he was reading. And when the internet came out, oh Lord, he was Googling everything. He had whole folders about like I remember one time, I think him and my grandmother did this together, that they just started Googling like Black inventors, like, a Black person invented this, a Black person invented that. And they're like, I just out of curiosity, for no reason at all, other than just to know. And so that instilled in me a lesson to never be the person that just says, oh, I don't know. Go find the answer for yourself, do your own research, do your own studying. So that way you can't be just easily misled by somebody telling you something. So I love that. I would say that out of the many lessons that he taught me, that is a big one. Probably the biggest one to this day that I take with me always.
I love that. I love that. I'll read this little piece before we go. Grief is an individual experience. It's what happens after you lose someone or something important to you. You don't have to know the person for their loss to impact you. Everyone experiences grief differently. Our culture, gender, age, past experiences of loss, and belief systems can also affect the way we grieve. So try not to compare yourself to anyone else or get too worried about the way you grieve. Everyone grieves differently. Remember, with support, patience, and effort, you will survive grief. Someday the pain will lessen, leaving you with cherished memories of your loved one. Brittney and Jasmyn, I really appreciate you guys doing this episode with me and take time out of your schedule. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you for being honest and sharing those stories, and I really appreciate you, ladies.
Thank you, Jasmyn. It
For
was
having
nice
us.
meeting
It was so
you.
nice to meet you.
All right, ladies. Good night. Take care.
All
All right, have a
right,
good
good
night.
night.
Well, that's it for the zone today. We are officially shutting it down. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until next time, remember this: this page might not be your favorite, but the next chapter of your life will be incredible.